Again. All right, so we are going to call this meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. We want to do an adoption for the 2/7/24 meeting minutes. Do I have any, excuse me. Okay, I'm sorry. So we need to adopt the 2/7/24 meeting minutes. Do I have anyone, what is it I need to say?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the minutes from February 7th.
I second Dawn's motion.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Meredith.
And we need to adopt the agenda for this evening for 3/6/24. Is there a motion to adopt?
Before we go to that, is there anyone that objects to the adoption of the meeting minutes? Please raise your hand so that we can see that. Otherwise, we'll assume all in favor.
Oh, wait a minute. People are trying to join the call.
That was a mistake. I'm in favor.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry. People are trying to join the call. And are we in favor to adopt the proposed agenda for 3/6/24? Motion to adopt the proposed agenda?
I motion that we adopt the proposed agenda for 3/6/24.
Thank you.
I second.
All right.
Thank you. And again, we'll go the same process. Any objections to the adoption of the proposed agenda, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will assume everyone is in favor.
Perfect. We don't have any public comment this evening, so we are going to move into the board member comments at this time. That will be Ms. Ray.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'll start by just saying thanks for your patience as we've moved back into this virtual fun meeting space. As you all know, the boardroom and our tech and AV spaces are undergoing some renovations, and hopefully they will be done quickly enough that we don't have to meet virtually for too long. It seems like it's like back to an adjustment of having to meet virtually. So thanks for everyone's patience. And the board is also meeting virtually for our meetings for the month of March. April 10th will be our only in-person board meeting. It's going to be held at Frederick Community College until it's our only in-person board meeting until the board renovations are done, which will hopefully be by the beginning of May, and then we can all be back in person together. But people are welcome to join us in person for our board meeting in April 10th as well. Otherwise, I don't have a ton of comments tonight. We had a community listening session, our board community listening session. It might have been last week or the week before. Time gets away from me sometimes, but that was held at Catoctin High School. And our goal is we'll be holding these community listening sessions quarterly, and we're trying to move around to various locations in the county. And anybody is welcome to join any of the listening sessions. You don't have to be affiliated with that feeder pattern to attend, but our next community listening sessions will be held on May 6th, and we'll be at Linganore High School for that session. So anybody who wants to come out and have a little bit more of an informal time to chat with board members and hear about concerns, challenges, things happening within the community, you all are welcome to come out and join us. There's a lot of information that is sent out around those community listening sessions. And otherwise, it's Women's History Month, so happy Women's History Month. Do some great things to celebrate the women in your lives, the influential women in your lives. And there's many influential women on this call, so glad to have you all with us and celebrate Women's History Month. I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you.
And Brooke, do you have any comments you'd like to share? Our student member of the board.
Yeah, happy Women's History Month. Sorry, my camera's not working for some reason, but I'm hoping everybody has a great week. Nothing that I can really think of off the top of my head.
Thank you. Senior staff comments?
Is that a
Yep.
question Don had
Dawn.
based on the comments?
Yes, I just had one question. When you have the listening sessions around the county, are all board members present for that? Is that the expectation? Or is it just some because it's more informal?
That's a great question. So our intention is to have a minimum of four board members present at the listening sessions. We've held 2 so far, and all 7 board members have shown up to both. So I think most of our plan is to try and be at all of them, but sometimes scheduling things come up. But we have committed to have at least 4 members present for the sessions.
All right. Scott?
Sure, I can go first, Dr. Harris. Good evening, everyone. Scott Murphy, Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Just a couple of updates that I can lend some perspective to. Number one, speaking of listening sessions, Dr. Harris's team, our directors who supervise schools, and our directors in special education, we're in the process of conducting listening sessions with students. And we're branching out across the district, talking to students about their experience instructionally, their experience with their teachers, their experience, some of the things that have come up in this committee, such with their interactions with each other, the overall climate in their schools, and the list goes on as students bring up important issues to them. We're in the process of that right now, and we'll be gathering some data, some themes, and I would expect in the future we would want to report back to this committee about some of the themes that we heard from our students. So we want to do that. That's underway, and either one of the last meetings of this year or early next year, we'd want to share with you what our students are saying about their experience with anything related to their experience in our schools. Second thing, many of you may be aware or even attended an event last week sponsored by the NAACP regarding where we are in Frederick County with all children being ready to read by grade 3. You may be aware of a lot of conversation across the country about not only recovering from the pandemic, but really addressing the disparities as we look at data and students being reading on grade level by 3rd grade, as well as making sure that school districts are adopting the right practices. You may hear about the science of reading. You may hear about new curriculum. All of these things come together. And so it was great that the community put on an event like this. And we as a district want to make sure that our community is aware of things that are happening here, such as being tightly aligned to the science of reading, adopting new curricular programs that are tightly aligned to the science of reading and really make equitable the instructional resources that students have access to, as well as some promising data that we're seeing here in FCPS as it relates to growth among our students each and every year since coming out of the pandemic. And so we look forward, we think there will be additional conversations in the community such as this one. And again, probably a second topic that we'd want to come back to this committee on, maybe in the fall, just sort of the state of the union in FCPS with all things reading, particularly in the elementary grades. But that was a really nice event last week that I wanted to draw your attention to if you weren't aware. And then last thing, our work with regulations aligned to policy 117 continue. In the curriculum department, we've been working on many regulations that have to do with curriculum resources, textbooks, courses, pilot courses, guest speakers, field trips, the list goes on of all of these regulations that are being updated to make sure they're aligned to policy 117. Will probably be published before the end of the school year or early in the fall. So just always want to come back to that and remind this committee that work is underway. That's it for me, Dr. Harris. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else about our student listening sessions or the NAACP forum last week or any other items that you have.
Yeah, it was good to see several staff who attended that, and I think you captured it well. I know that Dr. Cuppet and you and other staff will be following up with them to clarify some of the information that was shared there so that our community, the NAACP, and others who are part of that event have the actual information that we're doing and the practice that we're doing in FCPS. As you said, those student listening sessions are fantastic, and that's just some of our ongoing work that we've been doing to engage student voice. As we've shared previously, all of our schools must engage student voice as part of their school improvement plans, and we do it in other ways as well, through our student listening sessions, through student voices, and through our Changemaker Summit. Dr. Artis, I know you wanted to share that, and then I'll just wrap up with something else.
Okay, so I will start off with that. Well, actually, I wanted to address one more topic from us on our office and mentioning the events that we have been able to attend. So since our last time meeting, we have been able to support and attend a number of Black History Month celebrations throughout the county. In particular, I'll just give a shout out to Frederick High School, Thomas Johnson High School, Oakdale High School did an amazing job with Black History Facts. Monocacy Elementary had an amazing door decorating contest, and we were able to go and support them in that decorating contest. And Tuscarora Elementary School, they had a STEAM fair, a Black History STEAM fair, where the students at Tuscarora represented various Black history figures in the science, technology, engineering, and arts and mathematics categories. And the students were amazing, and they had their speeches ready, and they were presenting to me and other adults, but also as classes came to visit. They did an amazing job with really capturing Black history and learning about Black history and just sharing it with their classmates. And so this past month was great, and being reminded of that. If you've seen the newspaper, you saw Thomas Johnson High School celebration too, and it was an amazing time. And while we're here, a shout out to Miss Camille Bell, or Dr. Bell, excuse me, who is also stepping in to coach the Urbana High School STEP team, who was very busy during February, and they really shared their gift throughout the county. And Dr. Harris and I, we also had the opportunity to attend the Frederick County Government's Black History Celebration. So it really has been an amazing month of celebrations and really highlighting Black culture in our past, present, and our future as well. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the people, especially on this call, that's been a part of elevating that work.
Before you go on, also Maya Massey is on our call at Frederick High School, and those students that you are growing and developing and leading there for just leadership in their school and various programs, Ms. Massey, is just outstanding. And it was great for Dr. Artis and myself to work with them on a couple of projects throughout this past month. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Did not hello, Miss Massey. So along with that, as Dr. Harris said, and right now we are preparing for our Changemaker Summit, which will happen next week. Next Thursday, we are preparing to welcome the 8 schools that participated in Student Voices sessions this fall. So we have, and off the top of my head, I can't think of the 8 schools, but we have the 8 schools, and we have about 200 students from those 8 schools that will be present. We have partnered with Hood College to host that event. We are excited because we're really elevating our students' voices, and our guest speaker for this year's event will actually be Promise Green. She's coming back to talk about her experiences being a change maker in our community. Again, what she's done in FCPS and in our community, and how she's using her voice right now to help impact change in our community. So that's next Thursday, and we are expecting about 200 students at that event at Hood College, and so we're excited about that. And then the last part of Student Voices for the year is we have planned our Equity Eats, which is kind of our last session to go into the schools, and we are planning those. We have many of those already scheduled for the last 2 weeks of March, and so we will be in schools and the 8 high schools, the 4 high schools, 4 middle schools, and having lunch with students and just talking about their experiences since we last met back in the fall, and then from Changemaker, what they've learned and just giving us recommendations on how to move forward and what they would like to see happen in their schools. So those are our updates.
And the last thing that I'd like to add is just a welcome to Dr. Afi Mirshaw, who is our high school instructional director, who's joining us tonight for our next discussion once we get to that. And just appreciate the Racial Equity Committee for their responsiveness and making shifts in the agenda because we do value the voice of the Racial Equity Committee and lensing some of the work that we're doing, not only as a department, but also with some of the things that we're doing as a school system. So thank you for spending a few minutes with us, Dr. Mirshaw.
Can I ask if anyone on the committee has an issue with having Dr. Mirshaw present after the SOCA update? Michelle has to drop off the call early, and I want to make sure that we hear her voice.
So I do know that Dr. Mirshaw does have another engagement, and so I told her that we would have her to come first because she's leading this work on behalf of the directors and felt that it was really, really important to get the Racial Equity Committee's voice. And so if we could have about 20 minutes or so just to get some feedback, and we'd really, really appreciate that because we don't want to miss the opportunity for the Racial Equity Committee to hear and provide input on some of our most immediate work that we're doing. So, Michelle Early, I don't know when you have to drop off, but I do just make that request given that Dr. Mirshaw accommodated her schedule to be with us this evening.
I yield to you, Dr. Mirshaw. Thank you.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. If you could actually turn the slides off, Sabrina, I would appreciate that. So I'm going to put in the chat a link in case you would like it. And the link that's there, you may or may not be familiar with it. Maybe you've read it and you're very well versed, but is the current dress code policy. So I want you to have that open on a side screen or just have access to it.
And while they're opening up, let me just set the context for this. So at our last Racial Equity Committee meeting, we had our staff attorney to come just to share legal practices and how decisions are made with regards to equity, informing some of the decisions that are made with our policies and our regs, and just how some decisions are made. And there was a lot of conversation and discussion that happened during our meeting with regards to some of the complexities that occur in decision making when there are matters of race, equity, diversity. And one of the things that we had discussion on was about our dress code. And there was some hearty discussion around that. And as Ms. Gallagher said at the last meeting, oh, by the way, we're reviewing the 400s in our policies and the dress code policy is coming up. And so the policy committee did have conversation about the dress code. And then they gave some direction to get some feedback, which is why Dr. Mirshaw is here. And so that's why we wanted to get it on this agenda, because we know that we have something different for next month. And we wanted to make sure that we were able to include your feedback in the board's discussion when it comes back up to them. Ms. Gallagher, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything else about it.
Nope, that was perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Dr. Mirshaw.
Right, that was a good introduction. So as I said, the chat has the link for the actual policy in case you don't have it. I'm going to share my slides for just 3 slides that are informational. And then after that, it's a conversation. We have some set questions that we want to ask and just get your feedback on. We'll be taking really good notes. This is the first group of many that we will be asking for feedback on this policy. So let me put my slides on and just go over a few things briefly. Okay. So you know the reason we're here is the dress code policy and suggestions that you may have for us. I wanted to make sure everyone just had this context. Some of this Dr. Harris already shared, but we were charged with reviewing this policy and making sure that we had feedback from all of our key stakeholders, elementary, middle, and high school, staff, leadership, students, parents, and the community. So this is actually the very, very first group that we've come to as a part of this process that will take some time to collect as much feedback from all of our stakeholders as possible. I wanted to just remind you, I went to do a look to see where in our student code of conduct does dress code come up and what do we say about it. And so as you can see, it is specifically addressed in one item. And it has, level 1, which is like the basic teacher addressed level. Student is wearing something that is near but not within the county dress code. And we trust our educators to be professionals and to be able to interpret and understand, what that is. Then we get to levels 2, 3, 4, 5, and a dress code violation does not go all the way up to a 5, meaning is not something that you can expel a student, request 10 plus days in an alternative setting. But you have levels 2, 3, and 4 as a range based on what happens. And it just says violating the school system's dress code. So the dress code is addressed in the code of conduct. There is professional judgment that comes into play for our teachers and our administrators as they're looking at any violation and making determinations if a consequence is needed. Now, I can tell you all year long, there has not been one consequence that I'm aware of for a student based on dress code. But since it is in our student code of conduct, I wanted to make sure that I brought that to the attention of the group. This is also part of our students' rights and responsibilities language that is a part of the code of conduct. So I'll give you a second to take a look at it. Looking at our students' rights for being able to express themselves, but also weighing with that the importance that we have to have our school system be a safe, productive, positive learning environment. And that anything that disrupts that mission and that purpose, has to be addressed. So our students do have the right to express themselves in their attire. However, we cannot get to a point where we're disrupting the learning environment and the productive, positive climate in our schools. And then this is just some additional language from the code of conduct for students. And I know I'm going through this quickly because I want to get to the more critical part, which is asking you some questions and getting some feedback from you. But these are some guidelines that our students have been given in writing around what the expectations are. So not overly revealing, not illegal or violent, promoting illegal or violent conduct, not obscene, offensive, vulgar, discriminatory. Really kind of trying to talk on that hate speech and targeting of students based on appearance, culture, ability, race, ethnicity, right? Someone wearing something that does that is not acceptable. Not having threats or gang symbols. The second bullet on the right box talks about the clothing can't be something that's used to hide things that should not be in school. Things that are not allowed in school cannot be concealed in student clothing. And then there's provisions for headgear for religious reasons that's spelled out. And other. And then quickly, just again, a little bit more language. This is stuff that's already been communicated to students, families. This is really the expectation. And this ties into hate speech and slurs. And so one of the things we have to think about with this group, and this is something we'll have to grapple with. We'll have to grapple with our legal team. What if I wear a shirt that has a message that someone would look at and say is hate speech, is hateful, is creating an inappropriate climate, is creating a disruption in our schools. How do we as educators weigh, where is the line on me saying I have some freedom of speech and I want to wear this shirt and I can wear this shirt? And then where do we say, but the shirt you wore is offensive, it's creating a disruption, it's an example of hate speech. This is not something that we tolerate here in Frederick County Public Schools. That's something we'll have to grapple with, and I know that there probably aren't easy answers. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides if that's okay. It's just easier for me to be able to see everyone. And what I have are some questions. I'm going to look off to the side to be able to read the questions. I can also put them in the chat. I have about 5 questions that I really want some feedback on. But let's say I ask a question and it doesn't resonate with you. You have no feedback to give at this time on that question. That's okay. We can move on to the next question. You can add something to the chat if you want to just type in something, or if you would like to share something, if you could do the raise the hand button so that I can just see, or unmute yourself and talk, and we'll make sure that everybody has a chance to be heard. I do want to get through all of the questions. I also want to have time for you to add anything that I hadn't thought about. If there might be a question that I didn't ask, or a consideration that didn't present itself that you think we need to make sure we consider. So we're going to be taking really good notes as you share. And so I really don't want you to feel like you can't share something because I didn't ask the question, because I could have missed an opportunity to get some important information from you. So the very first question is, as you reflect on our dress code, how does the dress code policy, and it can be as it's written or as, as I shared it with the slides and the overview that's available, but how does our dress code policy impact members of our Frederick County Public Schools community? I'm going to give you some time. And maybe that's not the question that's resonating with you. And I'll put the next question in here and we'll just see where you feel. The second one that I had is the language in our dress code policy inclusive for all students? Do you think that we've captured inclusive language that applies to all of our students? I'm getting a thumbs up that it is inclusive. I hope that means you do find it inclusive. Thank you. If you all are silent on this next question, I'm going to be shocked. But let's see.
Wait, do you want me to say something? My husband wants to make a comment about
yes.
that question.
Sure.
He's like, well, what about like white supremacists and like rebel flags and stuff like rebel flags and stuff like that on clothing?
Yeah, is that as frowned upon as, quote unquote?
I mean, like,
stuff?
what about having that type of language included in the policy so that?
So that's exactly where that was the next question. So I wanted to get some, it's like you looked at my slides in advance. So I wanted some general ideas around the dress code policy to see if you had any general, but then we do need to get into some of the specifics. And the example that I think, we've talked about is, what if I'm wearing something that somebody else finds offensive? That can be the Confederate flag, that can be some words, that can be an image, that can be lots of things that somebody else would look at and say, okay, I find this offensive, or this is creating a disruption. So taking a look at this question, the dress code policy and the wearing of items that could be considered hate speech. What are your thoughts on how we address that? And what do you think is really important for us to capture in this? Knowing that there are First Amendment guidelines we have to follow and legal guidelines we have to follow. And knowing that that's going to be a really, we have to find the right balance there. What are your thoughts What would you like the policy to say around what I wear? And if it is hate speech, what would you want our position as a school system to be? Okay. And I see two people. Is it, I think our student, I couldn't tell who did it first, but our student member of the board, Brooke. And then is it Heidi? I can't see. all of-
Sherry. Yep,
It's Sherry Heidel.
Heidel. Okay.
Yep. And Angie, as you begin to speak, just for everybody, as Dr. Mearshar said, we're capturing comments in the chat box as well.
Yeah.
So if you don't raise your hand, you just want to put it in the chat, we're capturing that. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. So who was first? Heidel, did we say you were first?
And I don't care either way. Mine's quick though.
Okay.
I will say for me, the hate speech / freedom of speech really goes back to what is the history of that, your freedom of speech. We all know that Confederate rebel, there's a serious connotation to that. But in the next breath, and there are kids who will say, well, Black Lives Matter to me is hate speech, but it doesn't have the history of.
Mhm. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right, student member of the board, Brooke.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I just have to go along with everybody else, something about like viewing hate speech as hate speech. I know a student in Frederick County who was told by another student that her Star of David necklace offended the other students. So I'm curious how that would kind of be dealt upon. Would she have to take it off? Would that be a violation of dress code?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think that's where you see the complexity of where the line is. Is it reasonable to say that someone should take off their Star of David necklace? Is that creating a disruption? Is that hate speech? I think these are the kind of questions we would have to ask, and we would have to have some idea around how we want to make sure that our school leaders, our administrators, and our teachers are very clear in the guidelines as well of what they can and can't do. Because on the other side, I mean, someone has a right to wear their Star of David necklace. And so we have to really balance the rights and freedoms that people have with the climate and culture that is important to maintain in our schools. And so I don't have answers, but I want to hear the important topics from you. Is it Angie? I think you were next.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. And my husband, Chris Bigliotti, is also here.
Hi everyone. Just hanging out in the bed, casual Wednesday. I think that one of the things that we certainly want to try to avoid in this and reject if anybody else tries to sell it is in any way comparing something like the Star of David, like somebody's very deeply personal and sacred religious symbol with like a swastika or any sort of symbol or artifact of racism or anti
or hatred.
And not just I know we're just anything that perpetuates inequities and bigotry, and so if you want a clear delineation, that could be it. So, and I don't know how you would make that a policy. That would be Ray's job to try to hack that, figure that out, I guess. But
Well, and I mean the other thing is like, if somebody is wearing like maybe a Star of David necklace or something, it's covered. Obviously, there is a direct delineation between, something that is culturally unacceptable now in this day and age and, something that is just a religious symbol of some type that somebody, cares for.
Thank you. And thank you for the comments in the chat.
Dr. Mearshar, can I just interject real quickly before we continue on? So One of the challenges with the fact that we're meeting virtually is that we have members of the committee and members of the public who are participating, and I don't want to stifle any conversation. And I definitely appreciate the comments, but just want to make sure that this space is for committee members to share their feedback. But I'm wondering, Dr. Mearshaw, if you could share maybe your contact information for anybody who is attending to be able to share some of their additional feedback that way, because typically the public comment would be at the beginning of the meeting. And so just for the flow of our meeting, no need to apologize. It wasn't clear as part of this, but if you could share your contact information. And then I know you're also going to be doing some additional outreach in the community and schools to get additional feedback.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's maybe my apologies because I'm new and I didn't know. But yes,
it's the virtual meeting format. This is our first time back in virtual, post pandemic, and so it's no apologies are necessary at all. Just want to make sure for the flow. The meeting.
Yeah, Dr. Bell, if you can recognize those who have hand raised, because you know who the members of the committee are.
Yes.
That would be helpful. So we were talking about students wearing items that might be considered hate speech. And so I think that's really where we want to go back to, right? How do we define hate speech in what someone else is wearing? It's not necessarily that I don't like your Jewish Star of David or your cross or your whatever. That item represents something that could be hate speech. So I think there's that distinction. It's not about my personal preference if I do or don't like something. It's where can we say there's some consensus that this item is something that could promote hate or hate speech or be seen as hate or hate speech. All right, others who want to share. If not, we can go to the next. And I will, at the end of this, share my email address and would be happy to take remarks from anyone who has anything they want to share as well. So if we want to think about, and I will put this in here.
Artie, I see your hand raised, and Artie is a committee member.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Dr. Bell. So just, I know I wanted to listen more and see what some of the comments and feedback was. I'm going back to our last month's meeting when this was, we did discuss this towards the tail end of the meeting, and it was one of the more hot button topics, I think, that the committee has reviewed and discussed. And obviously, yes, I think because Ray had brought up that it would be reviewed at the Board of Ed meeting. And I'm looking at all the different comments here, and thank you for sharing the policy link. My questions are, I think I'm just looking at the definition, number 6 around religion, and then the Star of David is what we're discussing right now. But going back to last month's conversation around a swastika, around a Confederate flag. And to someone's point here is what may be offensive to one may not be offensive to another. Currently, based on the policy, if we are saying that, and I know that we have had these experiences more recently around the Confederate flag, how is that being dealt with? I know we got into, I think the representative that was here last month was really there to share the legal perspective, right? And in terms of what's lawful and what is not, and what the actions that have been taken. But from a dress code policy, if you do have someone that walks in to the building with a Confederate flag, it's someone's culture, while to others it may not be. So how is that being how are we managing that, and how are we dealing with those experiences?
I think that's a great question, and we're going to capture that question. What I can tell you is that in my case, I supervise the 13 high schools. And the principals are very good about when something, anything, it can be dress code or anything else, when something happens that is out of the norm, that isn't something you see every day, that's not a normal occurrence that they're concerned about, they're very good about reaching out. They reach out to me, they reach out to the legal team, and we discuss each incident, each situation as it is presented to us that day. I can tell you that at this point in the school year, March 6th, I have not had an incident where principals called me to say that that has occurred, that someone is wearing a Confederate flag in school. That doesn't mean it won't happen. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but I can say that at this point, that isn't something that anyone's called me about. And I think if it was happening, it would be something that the principals would check in with me. But I think the question is valid, is what is the guidance and what would be the expectation? And then where is the line legally? And I think that's part of what this process is designed to do, is to gather that feedback and then also to work through the legal aspects and what we can and can't say, and then really refine as a school system what we share with our leaders, who are the ones who are addressing the kids in the community when these things happen.
Yeah. Artie, as you ask that question and think about it, what would you hope to see in a dress code policy regarding some of the things that you're talking about now?
Yeah, and thank you, Dr. Harris. I think, just looking at Meredith's comments here in the chat, it is frustrating, right, to not just have a list or imagery that we would consider inappropriate, but inappropriate, quote unquote, it's a very large scope. It's subjective, right? I say that with thinking about the Confederate flag, that could maybe be subjective, right? With our history. But when you're looking at imagery of a swastika, I don't know if that's quite subjective at this point. Is that something that we could create a list of either, imagery that we would deem as inappropriate in a school environment, where I can understand the Confederate flag, but when you're looking at a swastika, that is very clear to me what that history is and what that means and what defines that symbol. So again, it's not a perfect world. Could we get a list of imagery? Yeah, that would be great. But I do know, obviously, a lot of these discussions and images, and it is very subjective. But there are some terms, some phrases, some historical imagery. I don't necessarily know if it's subjective, right? We understand the history behind it. So why are we not able to define that as inappropriate?
And I think that's certainly great feedback. Right. I do want to share generally for policy, it's really big picture, right? It's really what is the big vision and the expectation. As someone who was very recently a school-based principal prior to being in this role, I think we also want to leave room. I think when you start to get to these pictures or these images or these words, you might leave something out. And so I think that's also a risk, because there are things that might, kids can be very creative. I love my former high school students, but people can be very creative in the things they say and do. And so we want to have some flexibility in case something were to happen and you don't want someone to point and say, it's not one of these 4 things, so I can do it. Right. So I think it's really hard thinking about what is the big picture vision? What do we believe as a community around this topic? And then giving guidance to our school leaders to be able to handle it and to be equipped. I do see lots of hands up, but Dr. Bell, I don't know who to call on.
So Tyrese. I have Tyrese is a member and Denise Brown.
Okay.
So you can start with those 2.
All right.
Okay. So I just want to read a piece of something I found online. So this is a case referring to a case that says Barr v. LaFawn, 2008. Racial tensions at a school prompted the school to ban clothing that caused disruption to the educational process. 2 students who wore Confederate flag shirts to school were told to remove or cover up the shirts or face suspension for violating the dress code. The students sued, alleging that the ban violated their First Amendment rights. Applying the Tinker standard, the Sixth Circuit Court upheld the ban emphasizing that school officials are not required to wait for student expression to cause an actual disruption before taking action. Rather, if the school officials, and this is something we talked about before, based on specific facts, past incidents of racial violence or complaints about racial discrimination, can reasonably forecast that the student expression will cause a disruption, they may preemptively suppress that expression. And so I think, I don't know off the top of my head what the specific examples are, but I think that if we can name and list certain historical examples here in FCPS of that type of racial violence and discrimination, then we have more ground to stand on in terms of putting something in the policy with this language, right? Which to me kind of falls under anti-racism, right? Which we worked hard, to build that policy and the regulation and fine tune that. And so I think that very much could be a part of that. And actually have, like I said, ground to stand on and teeth to enforce.
And it's as if I feel like someone showed you all my questions or my slides, because I just put that in there. That was the very next question, is how do we define that disruption? But before we go there, I know other people had hands up.
Yeah, we have Denise Hicks Brown, our co-chair, and then after that, Dr. Butler.
Hello. So I have to say, one of the things that you mentioned is probably the biggest concern that I had, where you said, oh, well, it comes back to us from the principals. That's great, except if you are in a place where you have principals who do not think that a Confederate flag is disruptive, or who do not think that a swastika is disruptive. So if we're waiting on self-reporting, I think that that's one of the biggest problems, number one. Number two, I think one of the frustrations that came out of the robust discussion that occurred last month was the realization that if we are using SCOTUS opinions as the ceiling and not the floor for our regulations, then we never address these issues. Because they are addressing an entire nation, because they are saying that many of these things are going to be left to the states, of course, SCOTUS takes a much broader view. And of course, the First Amendment is always the touchstone and where you begin. I think that I see that personally, and this was certainly one of the things that I think that I was definitely understanding where Steve was coming from last month, talking about this. That's where you got to start. However, and I apologize if if this can be chalked up to the fact that I got my legal education in California in the Ninth Circuit instead of the Fourth Circuit, but I think that it's the beginning. It's not the end. And there is no reason why states cannot be more restrictive than the federal government. It's one of the reasons why, when there are certain things that are left to the states that might also be covered by the federal government, that they have that latitude. And states do choose. State constitutions may be more restrictive than the U.S. Constitution. Likewise, if First Amendment rights that are granted under the U.S. Constitution, cover A, B, and C, there's no reason why we can't cover A, B, C, and then add D through H. And I think that, and I may be wrong and people can add, I think that that's really what the concern is that people have. I think that the message that they got in understanding what I believe is the baseline is, which is what SCOTUS has had to say about the First Amendment and trying to ensure that. I mean, the reality is you can talk about your First Amendment rights as a person walking around in the universe and the government infringing on you, which is really what that addresses. But once you come into a school, you are no longer an individual who is walking around the world with the government infringing on you. You are in a limited public space, not a public space, but a limited public space. And so the analysis shifts. And while I can certainly understand the desire to ensure that you don't run afoul of what exists in federal jurisprudence and its progeny, my concern is, and I think this is the concern that others have, if there is too much of a focus on trying not to offend what is perceived as a possible case that may come in the future, and legislating to that possibility that potential possibility in the future, then you can end up gutting your purpose without ever truly fleshing out your purpose, if that makes sense. And as we talk, I see the comments, and it just kind of makes me weep. And not unlike last month, when people are saying, "Oh, well, we can't do this and we can't do that." Well, no, the reality is that, and again, my personal feeling, and I feel like, the reality is no law is constitutional, is considered constitutional until it's been tested. You pass it, someone challenges it, and then the high court, whether it's your state or it's SCOTUS, says we bless it or we don't. And it's the rarest of cases that end up going to SCOTUS anyway. So, the reality is, rather than running out of the fear of litigation, that we actually address the issues, because the bigger problem that comes from running from a fear of litigation is that what you end up doing is creating generation after generation of people who feel unseen and unheard, because you are too afraid that the people who feel comfortable because they've been the dominant group, because you're so afraid of them complaining and griping about carving out space for those people who have felt like other. And then we are running completely afoul to our job as the Racial Equity Committee. So I'll now step off of my soapbox and say what I really think we should do is just go ahead and start to try to come up with some examples. No one is saying it has to be an exhaustive, itemized list, but there is nothing wrong. And in fact, it's a common complaint of litigators when they deal with any kind of progeny that comes from SCOTUS, is that they often fail to give bright line tests, or at the very least, at least guidelines. And I don't think that there is any problem going in fully educated about honest and educated about what some of the issues are in Frederick County, and have been historically, and attempt to address those things. No, we don't have to have images, but we don't have to just say hate speech without offering i.e., well, let me say that, I'm sorry, e.g., I don't want to say i.e. because that's very specific, but e.g., and then 3 to 4 things. I honestly was so insulted to hear someone say, "Oh, but the Star of David could be offensive to someone." If the Star of David is offensive to you, then you probably want a swastika in your school, and that's offensive to me. And quite frankly, that's more offensive, and I guarantee that I can find more jurisprudence that will back up keeping the swastika out. And that's something that those kind of extreme examples, in my opinion, are part of that fear mongering that has people hide behind the future possible litigation of a dominant party that's not happy if this or that or the other happens. The reality is there is nothing about a Confederate flag that is culture, period. I don't care who says it. That's my opinion. I'm not speaking for everyone else, but I absolutely believe that. And anyone that thinks differently, I want to give me some sort of treatise proof that that's not it's racist. It is. And historically, that's what it's been here. And I think it's something that is very clear. And I think it is insulting to compare that to a Star of David, and for people to try to, in some way, make those apples to apples. So, okay, enough with that. So,
well, thank you for the closing argument.
I'm sorry. I understand. And I guess my thought is, what is it that we really want to do other than try not to run afoul of any possible future litigation. Because the reality is, I can tell you, maybe there's a 25% chance of it being litigated. And even so, how far is that even going to get? And doesn't it have to run through all of your processes before it even shows up in the circuit court? So, can we not just speak openly about it, let everyone address all of that, and get it out there and work with what people absolutely know is offensive, and then start saying, okay, here's how we can do this, here's how we can approach this.
And I do think that you brought up many very good points. And one of the things I heard, if I want to make sure I capture this, one of the things I heard is at the beginning, possibly, that aligned with any changes to the policy, that we would need to do some professional learning for our leaders and make sure that they know the expectations, because that is, the expectations are that they report certain things to us. And so I feel like we just need to make sure that in my notes, I capture that our professional learning and expectations for our school leaders need to be aligned and clear. I also wrote down that really, I think, I'm hearing from many, many people, and I wasn't here last week and I don't know what was discussed, but there seems to be a lot of energy around the Confederate flag. So I'm just kind of pinning that as an item that has to be addressed. Okay, so just so you know, in terms of the feedback, that's what I'm hearing. We got to address the flag in whatever form it shows up in school, and some professional learning and expectations for leaders. And I understand I'm not a legal scholar or a lawyer. I'm here as a school system person who was an administrator in schools and worked with kids for many, many years. And so I do know we have another person waiting, and then I have two more questions that I really need your feedback on before this part, is completed. And I want to make sure I get this really important feedback. So is Ms. Butler a member of the committee? I don't want to, yes, I'm seeing.
Dr. Butler is a member of the committee, yes.
Okay, excuse me, Dr. Butler.
I think the point has been made very clear. So I don't want to add too much on or belabor the point. I do think that we should, as the racial equity committee, make sure that we are not continuing to police Black and brown bodies. I know that it was mentioned in the chat room that they're in the same way that there should be outlines. This is the standard: A, B, C, D, and E, non-negotiables. There's no training that's needed. We don't need to send it. It is a non-negotiable. There are certain things that we don't have to talk about. We don't have to meet about. We don't have to have another training. It just needs to be put in. You can, no hate speech, 1, 2, and 3, absolutely not. And turn them around and go back out in the same ways that if we're considering culture, there are a lot of things about my culture, or about Black culture, even if we take hip hop culture, that students know that they cannot come to school with. No matter how much it is a part of their culture, they'll be turned around at the door. And so we cannot continue to make concessions for people who want to do things and put them under the guise of this is my culture. And to make a slight shift, also, I think there needs to be a space where it is identified things that are acceptable. Black girls are allowed to wear their bonnets, no matter what people think about them. There is a process that is not offensive. That is not, certain people may feel like it's tacky. I don't have a problem with it, but that is not anything that would disrupt a process, and it would cause more harm to ask the person to remove it than to keep it on in the school, because we have no idea. Someone mentioned what may be going on under there, because the process to care for our hair as Black women is a lot different than other ethnicities. And so those things should not be penalized. There are things in the dress code that we have to really look at and make sure that if we're speaking on these things in the equity committee, that Black and brown people and students, male and female, are taken care of and protected. We should be outlining those. These are the problems with Black and brown people. These are the problems that have happened in the schools. What do we do to the policy to write these in to make sure that they're protected?
Thank you very much for sharing that. And we're capturing some notes. one piece that, I want to share is that's part of this process. We're going to be looking at policy language around dress codes from other school systems in the state of Maryland to see if there are some good examples that we can pull from. I didn't share any of my background, but I spent 5 years in Prince George's County as a principal of basically 100% African-American school. And so I do have some understanding in this particular area, not 100%, but some, in terms of ways that we can make sure that our language is inclusive and that all students need to be able to feel that they come into school, they're accepted for who they are and what they are. And I used to say all the time, it's not about what you're wearing or not wearing. It's about what's going to go in here. And we need to learn and focus. But I also understand we don't want to have people come into a place where they feel it's hostile. So this is the information that you're giving that's going to help us get to that point. I put another question in the chat, and then I do see a hand up. The other question is, as we're thinking about disruption, right? We have to really define what is disruption. We have a continuum. This is an ideal state. This is what I would want to see in the America that I live in. This is what I would want to see in the schools for our kids. And that ideal state is what we want to have for our students in Frederick County Public Schools. But we also have to have an idea of what actually is a disruption, right? So we're going to have to define these things. What is hate speech? What do we, however we choose to define it, and this is very early in the process. How are we going to define hate speech and what it is? Are we going to name names, list things? That's one part of this process. The other thing is, how do we define disruption? Is it because I like it, I don't like it? Is it preemptively before something happens in the school, like we think it's going to cause? Or do we just have a zero tolerance policy on certain things? That's going to also have to come into this, but I did have a hand that was up. Was it Artie? And are you a committee member?
Yes.
No.
And yes, she is.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mercer. Yeah, no, I did have my hand up. And then I was just actually reviewing the policy here again. I think there was also a comment in the chat about this as well. There was some research done to create this current policy. What data points did we review? I know you just mentioned that you will be connecting with other counties within Maryland, but we did some research. We, as in, the educators, right, did some research to come to this policy. I think it is important to also look back historically what has taken place at FCPS with the complaints that have been filed, and what actions were taken then to help guide us to move forward, right? So I don't know when this policy was adopted, but if it was over X amount of years, that's double digits. If it's 10 years old, we do need to reassess because things have changed tremendously, especially with social media and the access that people have to information. But I guess my question is, when we adopted the current policy, what research was done then? And can we not relook at those approaches, apply it to the current policy that we are looking to formulate, and really consider some of the language and the imagery that we are talking about that does cause these disruptions? And again, I think I know you were not at the last month's meeting, but we were discussing, some of these, some of the experiences that we have seen at FCPS that are the legal representative was sharing with us, and that it was really focused on what caused the disruption and really trying to define, is that something that could be hurtful, just going beyond, exchange of words. But there was an example that he had given of a student that, wore something that had some very, racially charged words on it. So I do think if we're looking to define that, what does that definition look like? But also going back into history to see what has taken place at FCPS, what complaints have been filed, and because of, if it was of dress code, what those imageries were, what were those words, just to really help guide us a little bit moving forward to create that new policy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I know that my time is short. I have about 5 minutes, I think, Dr. Harris, but I had the last question in the chat, and I did put my email, and I'll put it in there again right before I leave, which is, how do we want to make sure that the dress code policy that we come up with also allows students to show their identity? And that is all identity, all culture, represent themselves as individuals. What are some things that we need to keep in mind as we're thinking about that, while still ensuring school is a safe, welcoming place for all? Anything that you want to add around that idea of identity?
I think removing implicit bias is going to help. When you see a Black kid come in with a do-rag, don't assume they're a gang member.
That's correct.
That's just one example. But I mean, those types of things, of just a little more sensitivity and, you know, maybe having curiosity instead of judgment when you see something that you're not used to, that you don't understand, or that maybe you've seen, heaven forbid, portrayed in the media, in a movie, on a hip hop video or whatever, and you assume that this is somehow a representation of everyone.
Certainly, there's always room for cultural proficiency, for us to learn about each other. And I agree 100%. We don't want our students stereotyped or subjugated to that.
Any last comments in this last minute? So Dr. Artis and I have been feverishly taking notes, capturing everything that you've been saying, as well as the comments in the chat. And so, as Dr. Mirshaw said, this is the beginning of getting a lot of feedback, and your feedback has been extremely valuable. Thank you so much, Dr. Mirshaw, for joining us this evening and arranging your schedule to be here. So really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Mirshaw. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Side note, you know, once you're a high school principal, you're a principal of that school forever. And the thing that I'm missing tonight is my Largo Lions girls are in the regional championships in Prince George's County. And that's where I was supposed to be. And I was trying to leave early enough to get there. I'm not sure I'll make it, but I can probably watch on the NFHS network. But thank you all very much. I appreciate the time here. And thank you for all of the valuable feedback. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thanks, Dr. Bell. And I think Dr. Artis is here too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Okay. Our next item on our agenda is a SOCA update and future planning. Now, we've lost Michelle Early, who had the bulk of the update. She did share with me some notes. I do have Fasayo here, who is our current president, and she does amazing work. SOCA was given a $5,000 grant. The funds must be spent by July the 30th. Currently, they have spent $1,478.85, not including the cost for the 316 and the 224 buses, costs of bus for, or the money to donate to MSP. So I think there's a fee for us attending MSP. So that has not been deducted from that number of monies that have been spent. We are, and Fasayo can speak to that. We are working on right now, we have Maya here, who has graciously stepped in to take the lead on the field trip for the MSP. We are reaching out to members of the Frederick community to make sure that we can get a bus full of 40 students and 4 adult volunteers. So we need adult volunteers to support with this. Is a wonderful opportunity for our students. This will be, I think, their second or third time attending the conference.
What's the date again?
It is March the 16th. It's on a Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
We have sent flyers out to the schools. We've reached out to principals, and then there's a number of AP and connections in the community that we have that we're asking them to please reach out and see if we can fill the bus. We've had several initiatives for SOCA this year. We'd like to see them attended, better attended. So right now, I think we have 11 students that have signed up through the link. And again, our goal is 40. We were cleared to have our students participate. There's a talent show that they do. So we were cleared for our students to participate in that. They did not have an opportunity to do that last year, so we're excited about that. FSIO, what am I missing? Oh, we are up to 14. So I want to give FSIO an opportunity to speak, and then Dr. Butler, I'll come to you next.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all having a good day. Like Dr. Bell said, we're working on filling the bus. And I know personally, I sent out an email to advisors and principals, and I think it's being pretty well received because I know I attend CTC and it's been #1 posted on our Schoology page, and I've also heard it on the announcements. Since it's been sent to Mr. Concepcion, the principal at Oakdale, it was posted in our class of 2024 Schoology page, and then I talked to some underclassmen friends, and they said it was also been posted there. So I think it's been pretty pushed out. I don't know the extent to which, but I do know that people have seen it, and I've gotten some texts about it asking, what do we do and stuff like that. So I think we're doing pretty good with that so far. I guess, is there, any questions, or I don't know what else I'm meant to discuss here, because I know there's a meeting happening afterward too. So I don't know which one. So
there is a meeting afterwards. That meeting is for the SOCA subcommittee.
Okay.
And one of the things that we're going to be talking about, and since Michelle had to leave, we're going to talk about is what the transition plan is going to look like for SOCA. FSIO is amazing. FSIO is a senior. She's leaving. You all have heard me talk about this before. So we need to start thinking about how we're going to move the work forward. What does student training look like for the members who are currently on the SOCA leadership team? And kind of discuss where we need to go from there. So if the folks that had identified that they wanted to be on the SOCA subcommittee, those were the people who I sent the invitation to. If you did not receive an invitation to the SOCA subcommittee meeting, which is happening directly after this meeting, let me know and I'll just drop you a link for that meeting. So anyone who's interested is welcome. Hold on one second. Okay. Any other questions regarding that? And the next item on the agenda. So hopefully, again, if you are able to chaperone and help support that trip, I would really appreciate that. Unfortunately, I am booked the entire day, so I will not be able to go. So if we have any committee members who are available, please let us know. And Maya Massey, again, is going to be hosting the trip, so let her know as well. You can let me know and I'll let Maya know.
So so I can just Maya, I could just respond to your email.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, please. And if anyone else would like it forwarded to them, please let me know. I'll go ahead and
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we do.
Dr. Butler had her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Butler.
Sorry, I just had a quick question. I'm trying to figure out, because I really, really am wanting my children to be involved in this, but it seems like the information is just not being filtered down to them, and I'm missing the emails on my end. So I know at Linganore, they just did a Black student union. I think it was that they went out to Hager's, and it was a lot of kids there. So there is interest. How do we get this information to the people it needs to go to in a way that more people get a hold of it?
So we have reached out to, there's an AP there who I work with, Mr. Allen. And I'm asking him to please reach out to like the BSU at Linganore, the STEP team over there, those folks who are interested, who would be interested. I spoke to their advisor at Frederick High School when we were there for their Black Student Union event. So I know that there was some interest there. And also, Dr. Butler, if you want me, just send me your daughter's email, or send me your email and I'll send you the link and they can just sign up for it. Because
Okay.
again, it's a wonderful opportunity. They learn from students, because MSP is a student run organization in Montgomery County. So they're farther along with it than we are here in Frederick. We really need to kind of sit down and determine how our students are, how we can engage our students a little differently. They're very proactive. Those kids are like, they get in, they do the stuff. So we are trying to figure out how we can mirror that here in Frederick County, and we're excited about the work, but it is a process. It is definitely a process. I have Dr. Artis with her hand raised.
Hello, and I'm listening to Dr. Butler. So also the SOCA membership, they have a Schoology group. And so if we do have students in FCPS, and I don't know the Schoology group link, and I'm sure Pasayo, even Dr. Bell might have that available, but if you have students in FCPS, they can access the group through a certain code that they can access. And I know Pasayo and the group, they share all of these announcements through that Schoology group as well. So of course, continue to share things through the administration, but I know that Pasayo and the leadership of SOCA, they share things directly with everyone that's in that Schoology group for SOCA as well.
Yeah, I can put the link or not the link, it's a code that students would put into their Schoology. Either that, or we could also invite students if we have a first and last name, I think, or a school they attend. So I can put that in the chat now.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions regarding this topic?
And I believe there was a plan to also send out communication via Find Out First in regard to this.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. Yep, I did forward that to Public Affairs to make sure that they get the information out and through our Find Out First and other means.
So we are working, and the Schoology code is in the chat. Just a quick update on the community forum. We will be having a community forum. It is taking place on April the 25th. It is happening at Walkersville High School, and everything has been reserved and confirmed for that. We created a flyer. There's a couple of things that we need to address on that, and then we will be working with Public Affairs and the Racial Equity Office to get the word out to the community. This is the first time it's going to be at Walkersville, so I'm very excited about that. And we're hoping that we can get it heavily attended. We are going to invite a number of, all of our board members and other folks in the community who are viable in this work. So we're hoping that all of our Racial Equity Committee members will be in attendance. Again, it's April the 25th. It is at Walkersville High School. It is in person. So any questions about that? Okay. Our next meeting will be, so we have our racial equity, we have our community forum on April the 25th, and then our next meeting will be May the 8th, and that will be our last meeting of the school year. And then we're still working to find out if we can get a date before the end of the school year where we will be able to do our report, our end of the year report. There is no April meeting. It's just the community forum in April, and then it's the May 8th meeting, and that is in person back in the boardroom. Okay. If you all want, we can jump into our next meeting that was scheduled to start at 8, we can start it at 7:30 and finish sooner. Is everyone okay with that? Subcommittee members?
Yes.
Yes, Dawn. Dawn Lynch raised her hand.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Can you repeat that date again for the community forum in April?
April 25th.
So that's a Thursday and not a Wednesday.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. The time is 6 o'clock. It's scheduled for 6 to 8. And anyone who is on the committee who would like to come early to help set up, that would be great. I'm taking all help. Okay.
Okay, and then we need to have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Anybody second the motion?
I'll second.
All right, motion passed. We will, we can jump on the subcommittee link at 7:30.
Or do we just want to stay here? We could stay here and stop recording.
We could do that.
So
too.
we adjourn so you can stop recording at this point?
Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Thank you.
Maya, are you still on here?
I am. I wasn't sure if I was staying for the subcommittee.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
I will be in touch with you. I think I might be able to go.
Nice.
I
know that-
couldn't plan it, but I can help go. And
No worries. I think Sherry Heidel also responded and said she'd be
good.
willing to chaperone as well.
Okay, so I will